Hi guys, my name's Annika Jamal and welcome to my channel. If you're new here and you came to my channel through searching loss of a parent or dealing with grief or something along those lines, then I'm so sorry that we have this in common, and my whole heart is with you. And if you're here because you've watched my journey, then I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who has reached out to me and who has told me that they've prayed for my dad, who have given him du'as and so much love. I just want to say a huge thank you for that. So my cat over here is here for moral support, and I've got a glass of tea, a mug of tea, and we're gonna try and get through this, and I'm gonna try not to cry. So my dad, the beautiful Saeed Russian Jamal, he was 65, so he passed away on the 25th of December 2020. He passed away from COVID-19. He contracted pneumonia, so that was what his cause of death was, COVID pneumonia. However, he also had lymphoma cancer and was at stage 4, which is the last stage of cancer. So with COVID, at this moment in time, there are 1,000 people dying every day. And what hurt me was realizing that my dad is one of those statistics. And to a lot of people, they're just sitting there saying these things. Oh, people die. Yes, people do die, but people are dying before their time. My dad had so much life left in him. So anyone who has had a close family member who has cancer, you know that grief really starts as soon as you get that diagnosis. There's an ache in your heart and you're constantly thinking, oh my God, is the end near? With lymphoma, the doctors constantly told us that lymphoma reacts very well to chemotherapy. People tend to live a long time after being diagnosed lymphoma. And we were angry at first because they had diagnosed him at stage 4. So obviously you just skipped 3 whole stages. How did you not realize years ago that he had this? Because he was in and out of hospital constantly, having loads of symptoms that they just explained away, where they'd say, go and lose weight, then you'll feel better. Or they'd give him different drugs to suppress his symptoms that just didn't work. And then we'd constantly be going back to the GP or having hospital appointments and things. This was for years. And then only when it got to stage 4 was when the GP doctor realised, oh, he's got cancer. It was during the COVID times, so it was in between first 2 lockdowns. They took some bone marrow and did a biopsy on it just to confirm everything before they could go ahead with chemo. And they kept postponing his chemo because he had elevated temperatures and he had signs of an infection, and you can't give chemo to somebody who already has an infection because it would be really tough for them and they wouldn't survive. they put it off so many times. He came home for a while until those results came back, and they said that you need to wait until the results come back. As soon as they come back, we're going to put you in for chemo, the first treatment. So I remember the day, it was the day before his chemo treatment. He was supposed to go in, I was going to drive him there, and that's how you have chemo as an outpatient. And he was in agony. So after his first time at the hospital, he came back and isolated for 2 weeks, and we were giving him food to his room and things, but he was in complete agony all of a sudden. He couldn't walk. This was the man that was doing 10,000 steps around the park and back every day, because I showed him the health app on his phone, and I was like, look Dad, you can see how many steps you walk every day, it just automatically counts it. So he'd go on it and be like, oh my god, I'm gonna try and get this up every day. So in the summer, he was doing 10,000 steps a day. He was taking 2 walks every day and trying to beat his score from the day before, basically. And he'd come home and be like, Annie, look, and like brag to me. And then I'd be like so proud of him. So this was that man, you know, who would literally open jars for me because I'm too weak to open them. So he would do that. And then all of a sudden, he couldn't walk to the bathroom. He literally was like bending over in agony and like hopping to the bathroom. He couldn't put any weight on his legs at all. Like, I'm talking agony. He couldn't move. He was not going downstairs. Even after he finished isolating, he just wouldn't get out of bed because he couldn't. He physically couldn't. When he'd be stirring like a tea, he'd be like shaking, stirring the tea. This is where you see that person deteriorate so much, so fast, that you're like, is he gonna make it? But then you have hope. You just constantly have hope that he's gonna beat it. So we called the GP, and the GP ordered an ambulance, which took 4 hours to come. It just took so long because it was a non-emergency ambulance that the GP had ordered. And then I was like, I should have just called it myself. We helped him down the stairs, and then he was literally holding on to like the balcony bit and like the wall and like my brother, and like he got down to the sofa, and the space between the sofa and where they put the wheelie bed was like 5 steps, and my mum was holding on to him, he was holding on to the wall, the 2 ambulance people were holding on to him. Like, he really was struggling. He was in so much pain. Then he got to hospital and they kept putting off chemo. They kept saying, oh, there might be an infection, we can't go ahead with it, we need to do this test, we need to do that test. So then eventually they were like, we can't put it off anymore because he's deteriorating very fast. He had an aggressive lymphoma, so it was very quickly taking him apart. Before he had the chemo, we were allowed to visit once on the haematology ward. He had his own room and ensuite and everything, so we were allowed to visit. We went in and I remember him pouring a glass of water, and the water just went absolutely everywhere, and his hand was like shaking trying to pour it. So I cleaned it up. He was really scared at the start, but because all the doctors were saying lymphoma gets cured, he will have many years after this. So we kept telling him that. We were like, you're gonna be fine, stop being so melodramatic, you're going to be okay, you're gonna live many years, You're going to be walking me down the aisle. You're going to be doing this and doing this. You don't need to tell me all of these things because you're going to be absolutely fine. But I think when he was feeling really bad, he started looking into what happens when he dies. So what happens with the costs, what happens with the ceremony, who conducts it, all of those things. And he told me a few things, and I was almost angry. I was like, stop it, you're gonna be okay. Like, I don't understand why you keep doing this. Everyone keeps telling you you're gonna be okay. And then after his chemo treatment, 3 days had passed, exactly how they said, by the way. They said after a few days after chemo, he's going to start feeling better. And oh my God, he was over the moon. He was like, I feel better. My stomach has completely gone. He literally had a massive stomach because of the cancer. And all these doctors before kept telling him to lose weight. And then literally after he had that chemo, his stomach just went, like, it literally just deflated basically, because the gas wasn't in his stomach anymore. It wasn't pressing up against it. That was the most uncomfortable symptom that he had. He was like, oh, I feel better, I'm gonna be fine. And then all the hope comes back again. There isn't even a doubt in your mind that he's not even gonna come home. You know he's gonna come home at this point, you know. We were all calling him every day, trying to keep him entertained and stuff, because obviously being in hospital is so boring. My dad doesn't speak any English, so I was doing all of the translating. I was doing all of the, oh, the doctor called me and told me they did this scan, that, blah, 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 or this is what's going to happen today, blah, blah, blah. So I was doing all of that. My brother helped sometimes, but he was at work. So I started getting calls from the Macmillan team. So they tell you about home care and things, and they told me how I need to buy a thermometer for him, because if his temperature goes to 36.5 or something like that, then it might be alarming. And then if it goes to 37, then we need to go to A&E, because that's an emergency. Because a chemo patient shouldn't have a high temperature. It means that there's something alarming there, and it's hard for them to even fight off like a flu. Day later, I get a call from the nurse who said, we were sending him home today, but he's been diagnosed with COVID-19, because we do a test before sending them home. We do them every week. And my heart sank, because the Macmillan nurse had just told me that he can't even handle a flu, and that's an emergency. That's an A&E emergency. She told me that if he gets a minor temperature. Now this woman is telling me he caught COVID. One of the nurses or doctors gave him COVID, and the whole ward was a COVID negative ward. So they weren't letting anyone onto the ward. They were very particular about everything. They were so strict with it, because we tried to see him again and they just wouldn't let us. So then after that, I was like, oh, my dad is so strong. He's gonna be fine, you know. You just don't want to believe it. You just don't want to believe that this person isn't going to be able to survive. My dad was like literally searching for husbands for me while he was sick. And when we would call him, he sounded okay. So it was hard to think that this person is going to die. I remember seeing my friend's mum, and she was telling me a story about how someone passed away from COVID and he had underlying health issues, but my dad was going to be okay. And I said, you know, my dad has cancer. And she said, but the person that passed away, he had underlying health issues. And I repeated, but my dad has cancer. There is nothing quite like an underlying health issue than cancer. And she was like, don't worry, he's going to be fine. And I remember that conversation was the first time I let myself believe that he might not make it. Because I realized people don't understand that underlying health issues can literally mean diabetes, it can be asthma, it can be a high blood pressure, it can be cancer. And lymphoma already attacks the immune system. So on top of that, he just got given chemotherapy. This man doesn't have an immune system. It's being destroyed by two different things. So as the days went on, I still believed he might pull through. But then every day I'd get an update and they'd call me and say, today he's on 30% oxygen. Then it went up to 50% oxygen. Today he's on 60% oxygen. I remember asking, what's his chance of recovery? And they said 60%. He might survive, but he's extremely high risk. So I said, what do you mean by high risk? And they said, high risk to death. He might die. And obviously I already knew that, but I just needed someone to say it. But I still believed he might pull through. And then I remember my dad calling me hysterical. He was like, they're trying to kill me, they want to kill me, they're trying to move me, tell her, tell her. So I was like, what's going on? And then they explained and said, we want to move him to the high dependency unit because he's requiring more oxygen. And I was like, you're terrifying him. You just came into his room, didn't explain a thing, and started moving him. He's terrified. He thinks you're trying to kill him. And he was just so scared. But in my head, I was like, oh, he's just overthinking it, you know? He's just being almost like ridiculous. But I think because he was feeling so bad and he wasn't getting better, all of a sudden, after feeling better almost, he was like confused. And they were trying to move him and without explaining anything, and it's already scary for someone who knows the language and understands what's going on. But for him, he was someone who had no clue what was going on. He had no idea what they were saying to him. His English got quite good though, because he was saying thank you and things to all of the nurses, or he was saying a few words here and there, and he'd joke to us and say, oh my goodness, my English has gotten so good being in hospital because I've learned so much and I'm speaking it so often. And he'd say that, and obviously it still sounded rubbish, but it was just so cute. But anyways, so I explained to him that on the hematology department they couldn't give him as much oxygen as he was requiring at that moment. And I explained to him that they're not trying to kill him, they're just trying to help him more. And when he goes to the high dependency unit, they can help him more and give him 100% oxygen. So then he was like, okay, I'll let them take me there. They took him there, and it was basically a COVID ward, and he was seeing corpses. He was seeing people die and be trolleyed away out of there. That's what he was witnessing. on the COVID ward, and then he had this mask all of a sudden that covered his whole face, and they only removed it to give him food and then put it back on. But he already wasn't really eating. He had lost like 3 stones from being there. As soon as he got moved to the high dependency unit, they were calling me every day and giving me an update every day. They told me that they'd put a DNR on his file, a do not resuscitate order on his file, which means that if his heart stops, then they will not resuscitate him. They will not give him any end of life care. And I fought with the doctors. I was like, that is so horrible, you cannot do that. And they explained to me that the decision is theirs. It's not something that we can fight on. But if he survives 7 days, then they will take that off his file. If he improves, then it's gone. Then it's a temporary one anyway. Because if they give him CPR, then they will be breaking his ribs and bones, and he still won't make it, and he'll just be made to be broken at the end of his life. So they said it's to have a more dignified death. So I just accepted it because I thought there's no way that it's even going to get to that point. So, okay, let's just get through those 7 days then. I explained that to my dad and he was like, okay, it's fine. Whatever happens, happens. So they told me that the intensive care people told him that my dad would not be suitable for the intensive care ward. So they said that they will not be putting a pipe down his throat to make him breathe because he will not wake up from it. And I was like, okay. When it comes to these decisions, and you have no power over it, you just have to kind of accept what the doctor is asking or saying. So I asked for a few second opinions. I got a second opinion, I got a third opinion, and they all said the same thing. So again, I accepted it. So then I remember calling him and normally when I call him, if he misses it, he'll call me back. And that was the first time. So that was the first time he didn't call me back. And I knew something was wrong. I get a call and they told me he won't survive the week. He has a very low chance of pulling through because they've put him on loads of different trials. They've given him all the help that they possibly can, and he's just not improving. So I went over to my mum and I told her, and she wiped my tears away and said, they're just being silly. They have to say stuff like that. Don't worry. And I thought, I'm not going to explain to her properly that it's real, because then it'll be really hard for her too. So then I just kept that information to myself and I went for a drive. I remember driving to a Sainsbury's car park and I parked up. I just sobbed. I still had hope he would pull through. After they told me that he only has the week, I texted him saying I love you, but he didn't open it. I just wonder if he saw that notification. So anyway, I got a call really early in the morning. So I think it was like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And they never called me that early. But they called and said, your dad will not survive the day. He will die today. So I woke up and I told everyone that today would be his last day on earth, which was the 25th of December 2020, which was a Friday. So I called my brother-in-law, told my brother and my mum, and I organised a video call for my mum. So everything was not working for some reason. FaceTime wasn't connecting, WhatsApp call wasn't connecting, but my mum and dad have this app called Emo. It's like where you call overseas people and stuff, but they have it with each other as well. So then we used that and that one connected. So we video called him and he had a mask on. He was just breathing very heavy. And my brother was a mess. He just lost it. And my mum, she just watched him and said whatever she needed to say. And then that day I had to contemplate whether we would go see him for the last time. At first I was like, it's selfish to go see him because I have someone at home who will die if she gets COVID, and I can't be an orphan at the age of 25. So then we went back and forth. My brother went in the morning, my sister came down and she went, and then my brother-in-law came into my room and said, you should go, I'll drop you off. So then I was like, everyone else has gone. There's no point of me thinking about mum at the moment because everyone else has gone. Who's going to return to this house? So then I was like, I'm gonna go. I made Alpha stay there. I was like, I can't do this on my own. So my brother-in-law dropped me off at the hospital. We had to have PPE on. And when I say PPE, I literally mean 2 layers of gloves, an apron from literally like covering like your thumb all the way, covering your whole body. Literally like a thick mask, like a diamond shaped thick mask. Then a visor on top of that, and like a hairnet and like shoe net things, shoe covers. So literally we were unrecognizable, and he was just there. Like I held his hand, but he wasn't holding my hand back. Like he was lifeless basically, which now I realise that they sedated him, which is why he was like that. But at the time it didn't occur to me. I didn't even know if he knew that we were there. So we left. And then I get a call again saying that they want to sedate him properly. So if they give him this sedation, then he will pass away in his sleep, basically. And then I was confused because it sounded like euthanasia to me, and I was so angry. I was like, absolutely not. I spoke to everyone, and my mum was like, my dad was right. He said that they're gonna kill me when they take him to that ward, and they did. Like, that's what she said. And she just was like, well, if they sedate him, then can he come out of it? And I was like, Mum, he's not coming out of anything anymore. And she just broke. After that lady said whatever she said, I asked for another opinion, and he said, come to the hospital. So all three of us met up and went to the hospital together. I said my mum wasn't allowed. I was like, you're not going there. So me, my brother and sister went, and then the doctors sat us down in a waiting room. There were 3 doctors, a man and 2 women. The man, he was taking a while to say whatever he was saying, and it was like frustrating me. Like, I was just like, spit it out, man. And then I realised he was finding it hard to tell us. And he was like, he had like, his eyes were wet. And then I realised that that's what it was. And my sister goes, oh, but will he still pull through? He could still pull through, couldn't he? And the doctor was like, and then she was like, no, I know what you're saying. I know you're trying to say he's not going to, but what if he does? And then the doctor was like, okay, in your hypothetical situation, if he was going to pull through, he would be able to, even with being sedated. And then we were like, okay, that's fine then. And then at first they said that we all 3 of us couldn't go in and see him together. But then we went down to the ward again, and the lady let us, all 3 of us. So we packed up in our PPE, completely unrecognisable again. As soon as he saw these 3 figures coming in, his hands went up like this. So my sister went on one side, I went on the other, and we both held his hands, and they just like slid into each other. And like, that's what I was craving the first time I went. I like just wanted him to hold my hand back. And he kept trying to talk, so he kept trying to remove his mask. And the doctors were like, no, we can't. If you remove his mask, then that's it. He's gone. Like, that's what's keeping him alive, that oxygen. But it was so condensed. There was like condensation all across it. I don't think he could see through it. But he kept trying to like scratch it off and pull it off, because he just wanted to talk to us and tell us his last words. And we all stood around him, just reciting with him. I could see his lips moving, and he was saying the Shahada and the kalimas that we were reading. He was saying it with us. He was terrified. He was so scared. We asked him, are you in any pain? And he went like this. So I think that meant that he had pain in his stomach. And then he went like this and asking for water. So we were like, can you give him water? And they were like, no. They were like, we can't take off that mask. We can't give him water. So we had to tell him no to water. And that was like heartbreaking. They didn't let us stay for long. We were there for about 30 minutes, maybe. They said we had to leave. And then when we were trying to leave, he held on and was like, no, don't go, kind of thing. And we were like, we have to, they're asking us to leave. And my brother went over to him and just basically said, you don't have a worry in the world, you'll be fine, you just rest. And then my sister said, just to comfort him, she goes, we're gonna be back later. And then he went like this, shaking his head so vigorously, basically saying, I know you're lying to me. I know I'm going. I know I'm going today. Like he knew. So we got home. And then by that point it was like evening time. So then we all got into bed, and then my phone rang and I knew. He was in hospital for a long time, but I knew he was in the world. But as soon as I got that call, I knew as soon as I picked it up, she was gonna tell me he's gone, because I felt him go. Like, I felt him leave the world. So then I answered the call and she just sounded really jolly. So I was like, maybe I was wrong, you know? But then she says, sorry, but your father's passed away. So I said, what time did he pass? She said, a few minutes ago. He passed away at 8:40 p.m. So I went downstairs and told everyone, and they all lost it. At the beginning, I was fine. I think everyone reacts to it very differently. For me, I didn't like have any reaction. I just was there. Everyone else was like crying, going hysterical, being crazy. And my brother-in-law came into my room and was like, are you okay? Because I just wasn't having any reaction. Might have been a combination of shock, disbelief, numbness. For the whole beginning period, I was quite numb. But then that day that he passed, my cousin brother from my dad's side and the funeral director came to my house, and my brother wouldn't come downstairs. So then I just decided to take over. So then we spoke about what would happen next and what the process was. And I just threw myself into that. I threw myself into dealing with everything. Because he passed away on Christmas, we were faced with multiple bank holidays and a Sunday. So it was very difficult for us to get the cause of death paper to eventually get the death certificate, because everything was shut. At the time, the funeral director had told us that somebody else had passed away, who lives in our area, and he just like told me about someone and how they were dealing with it and whatever, and they managed to get something. But I was calling them every day. I was calling the hospital every day to send off the papers, because my dad was in a fridge for days. Eventually we got through and managed to get the papers sent off to the council. Then it was trying to get a hold of the council because all of that was shut. Then a friend of mine messaged me saying that his dad had also passed away. He already had his janazah date and burial date, and I was like, how did you do that? Because my father passed away a day before yours and I just haven't been able to get through or anything. So he gave me a phone number for the emergency contact for a lady, and said that she managed to sort him out. So with this process, because of COVID, they don't require you to have the death certificate. You just need a green slip that needs to be sent to the funeral director, and then they can go and collect the body. So then I woke up that morning, called this lady, literally sorted it out, and then literally on that same day we had to organise the funeral, which was the janazah and the burial. Funeral director called me and said, we're gonna do it all today. And then I was like, but you said you've got another person, which was that person that contacted me. Actually, we had the same funeral director. A part of me was like, I want this day to be special for him. Should we delay it a day and then do it tomorrow? And then everyone explained to me that you do janazas and you can do the janazah of 100 people. Like, it doesn't matter, they all get this equal amount of prayers. Like, you're not taking anything away from that person. Everyone explained to me that actually it doesn't matter how many people get buried on the same day. He's in a fridge right now being frozen for 3 days and he is not feeling any peace. So once he's in the ground, he can finally like rest. That's when we just decided to go ahead with everything. And with every decision that I've made or had to make along this whole journey, whatever is the best decision for him. I don't care about myself. It's not about me. It's not about anybody else. It's about him. It's about making him comfortable, giving him peace. The janazah prayer, which is just the funeral prayer, we agreed to it being at the same time as this other person. So then everything just snowballed all of a sudden. And then we had him be buried and everything. And in Islam, women aren't allowed to go to the burial. So we had to be home for that. But I wanted to know everything. I literally was like, I want to know what happened after you stepped foot out of this house to the moment you stepped back into it. And I asked my lullaby, so how was it? And then he goes, we buried him. And I was like, you don't bloody say. And then I realised men are so bad at telling stories. Or some men. And then I asked my brother, and then I was like, tell me everything, I want to know. So then he told us everything that happened, how many people turned up and everything, and how the ceremony was, putting the body into the ground. I asked them to take some pictures. My nephew ended up taking a video of the burial from like beginning to end, and it was just for his brothers and sister so they could see, because they live in Bangladesh. So we were like, wanted them to, you know, have that or be able to witness it in some way because they weren't there. So that was for them. But then I watched it and everyone else was like, it was hard for them to watch. But for me, it gave me so much peace just to know that he's okay now. Like, I didn't feel sad at that moment. It was like a relief for me seeing him be put into the ground. But the days afterwards, I just threw myself into sorting everything out. I got his death certificates, I shut down his bank accounts, I changed the mortgage, I did this and that and all these other things. And so many people were confused. My friends' families were like, I don't understand why you're doing all of this. Because they have someone else. They have an uncle or an aunt or a cousin or somebody who would do all of those things. And for us, there is no one else. And I always knew that I'd be the person to do this someday. I just didn't realise that it would be at the age of 25. From a very young age, I have always said it, I knew that I would lose my parents before anyone else would, like any of my friends would. I don't know how I knew that, but I just always knew. But I always thought it would be after I get married and have kids, and then maybe by the age of like 40 is when I'd bury them. But that's still very young to lose your parents. But I just always thought that I would. I just didn't realise how young I would be. Then over that period of time, I was like very numb. I realised my brother was handling it in a different way, because I took my dad's phone and I saw that he was just like calling everyone under the sun to tell them that of his passing, and he was just asking them to forgive him for anything if he had ever hurt them. And in that moment, I just remember feeling so proud. But when I took my dad's phone, I remember going through it, and there was this conversation on WhatsApp where he sent pictures of me to somebody. So I called him and I spoke to him. And that conversation was really hard for me. That was like so difficult. It was the first time I really like broke to somebody. Like I was like really trying not to cry, but that time it was really hard because he was like explaining how my dad was worried most about me and my brother, and how he was trying to find me a husband and all of these things, because that's what he sent him the pictures for. And yeah, he told me he was an amazing person and that they all looked up to him and everything. We all decided to go get tested for COVID. We did the rapid test. I remember leaving the house, and that was the first time I left the house. I was looking out of the window and realising this is the first time I'm out in the world, out in a world without you no longer in it. And that was hard. We went to go get his name on the plaque for his grave. We visited his grave for the first time. We did ziyarat and just said kalimas and things for him, said du'as for him. And then we got tested, and 45 minutes later we got the test results back, and everybody in the house was negative. My mum isn't allowed to leave the house for 4 months and 10 days. So hers was a home kit, and she also tested negative. So I guess PPE does work. Then there was one day where my friend said that they would come and visit me, and before they came, I went downstairs and they were looking at beds on the TV, and I was like, why are you doing that for? Then my mum had decided to buy a bed for me, and I was like, no, I don't want one, and she was like, I want everything good for you, and I was like, no, I don't want it. And that was the first time that I broke down properly, because I just didn't want to change anything, because then he wouldn't have seen it. He wouldn't know what my room looks like. And then all of the other firsts were hard. Every first. It would be really small, tiny things, but every first thing that I did was hard. I realised in those first few days, none of us really had an appetite, especially me. I hardly ate anything. And I know that if everyone hadn't given us food and everything, like my family and friends, I don't think any of us would have eaten. I definitely wouldn't have. I don't think I would have eaten. It's the last thing on your mind to eat. But then at the same time, everyone was like, oh, we'll come stand 2 meters away from your door. And I was like, absolutely not. I do not want you guys to come here. That was before we got tested, where they'd say that, and I was like, absolutely not. Don't come anywhere near me, because I can't have you standing 2 meters away from me just to gawk at me. What's the point of that? It would just hurt so much more. But when my mum said that about the bed, I just looked at her and was like, I'm holding on to things that don't matter, but there's someone here who is still here, who wants to give me the world, so just let her. So I just agreed to it. And I was like, it's okay, I have a few more days until the delivery comes and I can just process the change. Maybe it will make a difference. So my sister left and the house went quiet. The bed came. And I thought it would just be a very small change. So it would just literally be the bed. But then we got a king size bed instead of a double, and I had to change everything. I remember sitting on the floor, putting the screws into everything, and just feeling like, I wonder what would have happened if he was still here. And then after I finished everything and I went to bed that night, I was just staring at the ceiling, like I'm in a room I don't recognise, and it felt horrible. And then I remember the first time I had parathas or rotis, roti or whatever you want to call it, and my dad used to make these. He used to make them really, really thin, and they tasted so beautiful. And I was just, it was so hard for me to have that, because that was the first time I was having that. The thing that helped the most was praying, because it would be for him. Anything that was for him helped. When I found his perfume and other things, it's crazy, everything suddenly has so much more meaning to it. Before it's just stuff, and then all of a sudden it's his stuff or something that he gave to me, like this necklace. All of a sudden it means so much more to me than just it being a necklace. Every day is so different. It's not just the days that are different, it's the hours in the day that are different. Some mornings are okay, some nights are okay, some nights are harder than others. Sometimes it's like an hourly change. There's only been one day where I just couldn't function at all, where I literally just slept that whole day. But I know that everyone handles grief completely differently. So for me, I threw myself into sorting everything out and helping him and being there for my mum and making my mum dinner every night. Like, that's what helps me. Cooking, cleaning, blah blah blah, doing everything for her. I don't know why, but that helps me. Some people lock their door and stay in bed for over a month. Some people go back to work the next day. Some people... There is no wrong way to grieve. Obviously, the hardest part is how surreal it is. Like, when I drive, it's so hard, because when you're driving, your mind is just like elsewhere. It just starts thinking things. So every time it hits you again, it's scary, and it's like a hole in your chest, like an ache, and it physically feels painful. Most of the time, I like to have it switched off. Some people tell me time makes it better. Some people tell me it never not goes away. Like, you grieve your whole life. There might be moments where you feel normal again, but there will be a moment in 3 years down the line where it's painful again, or where you break down again. And then obviously events are the hardest. And for us, we had New Year's 6 days later, because he died on the 25th. He was buried on the 28th. A few days later, we had New Year's. Then another 10 days later, after New Year's, was his birthday. And my mum, dad and sister had the same birthday. And that was the first birthday without him. There have been loads of things that I haven't been ready to face and have had to face. But you just carry on. You carry on for the people still here. And you think you can't handle it. But you do. You just carry on. For me, I always thought that he'd be walking me down the aisle. It was like this cemented thing in my brain that was just not changeable. And now I look forward and it's like, I don't know anymore. There was this massive section of your life is when you need your dad the most, but as an ethnic person, which is this period in my life right now, basically, as a 25-year-old, is when your life really comes into shape, when you need your dad to choose your husband, when you need him to make these decisions and co-sign you on a car and witness it and whatever. And I just always thought that we'd have this time together, and I don't get that. So the hardest part for me is how hazy my future looks, because it feels like I can't imagine it anymore. I don't know what it looks like anymore. And then it's he could have still been here. He would have fought it. Everyone said he would make a full recovery. He felt better. He was literally almost going to be sent home. Like, it's knowing that he didn't have to die. He didn't have to leave this world. But some idiot gave him COVID. And now he's gone. And that is what is hard. With COVID, it's these people don't have to die. But if they do die from COVID, they die as a martyr, because COVID comes under plague. And a few people have said that to me as well. So, in a way, maybe it is for the best. It was also the 2-week mark that he deteriorated the most. So, he was diagnosed 2 weeks before that, and the 25th was the 2-week mark of him being positive, and that's when he died. It's crazy because a lot of the information they've given is accurate because I've lived through it. But then there's so many other things that aren't being emphasized enough. Like, it's not just 80-year-olds that are dying. Kids in school are spreading it. If you got this far into the video, then thank you so much for watching. And please say a dua for my dad. Wish him the highest ranks of Jannah. Wish him peace and love and everything good in the hereafter. To everybody else who's going through this, you're not alone. And I hope that this video gives you strength. Because if I can go through all of this, having dealt with majority of this on my own, then you can too. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.